wish to remember for a purpose, namely, to ensure that never again will evil prevail, as it did for the millions of innocent victims of Nazis.
In the final moments of his life, Pope John Paul II, the beloved leader of the Catholic Church, spoke words that would echo throughout the ages. With his last breath, he revealed a mysterious message that has stirred the curiosity and concern of millions. Was it a prophetic warning about the end of times, a divine revelation of what is to come, or perhaps a secret hidden within the mysteries of faith? Join us as we unravel the secrets behind Pope John Paul II's final words, exploring the profound implications of his message and bringing to light its hidden truths. The death of John Paul XI. When John Paul II ascended to the papacy in 1978, he was a vibrant and active individual with a passion for sports. At the age of 58, he embraced a healthy lifestyle, engaging in activities such as jogging through the picturesque Vatican gardens, weight training, swimming, and even hiking in the majestic mountains. Additionally, he held a deep affection for football, which brought him immense joy. However, as the years passed and John Paul II's papacy endured for over 26 years, his physical well-being faced numerous challenges. He encountered 2 assassination attempts, one of which left him severely wounded, and experienced several cancer scares. These adversities took a toll on his health, causing a decline in his overall physical condition. In 2001, he received the diagnosis of Parkinson's disease, a condition that international observers had suspected for some time. However, it was not until 2003 that the Vatican publicly acknowledged this fact. However, he is not the type to give up. Despite the hardships he faced, John Paul II remained determined to fulfill his papal duties and spread his message of faith and love across the globe. Although he encountered difficulties in speaking more than a few sentences at a time, struggled with hearing impairments, and battled severe osteoarthritis, he persevered. He continued to embark on international tours, albeit rarely walking in public. His unwavering commitment to his papal responsibilities and his unwavering spirit inspired millions around the world. John Paul II was admitted to the hospital due to breathing issues caused by a bout of influenza on the 1st of February 2005. After being discharged on the 10th of February, he had to return to the hospital 2 weeks later for the same problem and had to undergo a tracheotomy. Following a urinary tract infection, he developed septic shock, a severe form of infection characterized by high fever and low blood pressure. He was closely monitored by a team of consultants at his private residence. This led the Pope and those close to him to believe that he was approaching the end of his life, in line with his desire to pass away in the Vatican. During the Pope's last days, the lights burned all night in his papal apartment. Tens of thousands gathered in St. Peter's Square for a 2-day vigil. On April 2, 2005, at around 3:30 p.m., John Paul II uttered his final words in Polish, "Allow me to depart to the house of the Father," to his aides. He then slipped into a coma about 4 hours later. John Paul II passed away in his private apartment due to heart failure caused by severe hypertension and complete circulatory collapse from septic shock. His death was confirmed by a 20-minute electrocardiogram that showed a flat line.
The Holy Father, John Paul II, died this evening at 9:37 in his private apartment.
A message from Pope John Paul II was read after the initial funeral mass held for the pontiff, followed by Archbishop Leonardo Sandri reading the text before the recitation of the Regina Coeli, which, during the Easter season, replaces the Angelus. The Pope had written, "To all of humanity, who often appear lost and dominated by the power of evil, egoism, and fear. The risen Lord offers his love as a gift, which pardons, reconciles, and renews hope in the soul. This love has the power to convert hearts and bring peace. The world must understand and embrace divine mercy." In his message, the Pope reflected on the Gospel reading where the risen Christ appears to the apostles, showing them his pierced hands, allowing an incredulous Thomas to touch them. The Pope revealed God's mercy, emphasizing how much he loved the world by giving his only begotten Son. He continued by acknowledging the Lord, who, through his death and resurrection, revealed the Father's love. The Pope expressed belief in Jesus and repeated with trust, "Today, Jesus, I trust in you. Have mercy on us and on the entire world." In his final moments, the Pope did not ask for anything for himself but prayed for the community, asking for God's grace to fill all his sheep with strength to overcome temptation, as he foresaw Satan growing stronger over time. As he neared the end of his life and no longer had the strength to fight, he simply asked God to take him home. Though he died naturally, this was not the first time there was an attempt to end his life. Pope John Paul XI, assassination attempts. When Wojtyla, the future Pope John Paul II, was 15 years old, he used to spend time with a friend after school. This friend's family owned a bar where a local policeman would occasionally visit after his shift. Whenever the policeman felt too intoxicated, he would leave his gun in the bar's cash drawer for safekeeping. One fateful day, Wojtyla's friend playfully took the gun out of the drawer and jokingly aimed it at Wojtyla, who was standing just a few feet away. He teasingly said, "Hands up or I'll shoot." In a surprising turn of events, the gun accidentally fired, even though it was dangerously close to point-blank range. Miraculously, the bullet narrowly missed Wojtyla. In February 1944, during a Polish winter, Wojtyla was on his way home from a quarry where he worked when he was struck by a Nazi truck. A woman spotted his body and rushed to his aid. Initially, they believed he was dead, but soon realized that Wojtyla was unconscious and seriously injured. Together with a German officer, they managed to stop a lumber truck driver and asked him to take Wojtyla to a nearby hospital. Upon regaining consciousness in the hospital, Wojtyla found himself covered in bandages, suffering from a severe concussion, a shoulder injury causing a permanent stoop, and multiple cuts. He spent the following 2 weeks recovering in the hospital, reflecting on the experience. Surviving this incident seemed to confirm his calling to the priesthood, as noted by his biographer George Weigel. It didn't end here. On the 13th of May 1981, John Paul II was the victim of an assassination attempt as he arrived at St. Peter's Square to deliver a speech. The assailant, Mehmet Ali Agca, a skilled Turkish gunman affiliated with the extremist organization Grey Wolves, fired shots at the Pope using a Browning 9mm semi-automatic pistol. The bullet struck John Paul II in the abdomen, causing severe injuries by perforating his colon and small intestine multiple times. Following the attack, the Pope was immediately transported to the Vatican complex and subsequently transferred to Gemelli Hospital. During the journey, he lost consciousness. Despite narrowly avoiding damage to critical blood vessels such as the superior mesenteric artery and abdominal aorta, the Pope suffered significant blood loss, amounting to approximately 3/4 of his total blood volume. To address his injuries, he underwent an extensive 5-hour surgical procedure. During the operation, surgeons performed a colostomy, temporarily redirecting the upper portion of the large intestine to facilitate the healing of the damaged lower section. Before being operated on, John Paul II briefly regained consciousness and specifically requested that his brown scapular, a religious garment, not be removed by the medical team. The assailant didn't go scot-free. Agca was apprehended and subdued by a nun and other onlookers until law enforcement arrived. He received a life sentence. In 1983, just 2 days after Christmas, John Paul II paid a visit to Agca in jail. The two engaged in a private conversation for approximately 20 minutes. John Paul II stated, "The contents of our discussion shall remain confidential between him and myself. I addressed him as a brother whom I have forgiven and in whom I have full confidence." This was proof that the Pope represented the true forgiving nature of Christianity. Several alternative explanations were put forward to account for the assassination attempt, with some of them generating controversy. Among these theories, one suggested that the Soviet Union orchestrated the attack on John Paul II as a response to the Pope's endorsement of Solidarity, the Catholic and pro-democratic movement of Polish workers. The 2006 Mitrokhin Commission lent support to this theory, claiming that communist Bulgarian security agencies were employed to conceal the involvement of the Soviet Union, and ultimately attributed responsibility to Soviet military intelligence. Russia dismissed the accusation as ridiculous. During a visit to Bulgaria in May 2002, the Pope stated that the country's leadership during the Soviet bloc era was not involved in the assassination attempt. Nevertheless, according to his secretary's book, A Life with Carol, the Pope privately believed that the former Soviet Union was responsible for the attack. Subsequently, it was revealed that several of John Paul II's aides had ties to foreign governments. Both Bulgaria and Russia contested the findings of the Italian Commission, highlighting the Pope's public denial of any Bulgarian involvement. Despite everything, another association attempt was made. On the 12th of May 1982, a second assassination attempt was carried out just a day before the anniversary of the initial attack on John Paul II in Fatima, Portugal. During this incident, a man attempted to stab the Pope with a bayonet but was thwarted by security guards. Despite sustaining a non-life-threatening wound, John Paul II managed to conceal his injury. The perpetrator, a former Catholic priest named Juan Maria Fernandez y Crone, was known for his opposition to the changes brought about by the Second Vatican Council. He accused the Pope of being a pawn of Communist Moscow and the Marxist Eastern Bloc. Following the failed assassination attempt, Fernandez y Crone renounced his priesthood, served half of a 6-year prison sentence, received treatment for mental health issues, and was eventually deported from Portugal to practice law in Belgium. The Bojinka plot, which received funding from Al-Qaeda, aimed to assassinate John Paul II during his visit to the Philippines for the World Youth Day 1995 celebrations. The plan involved a suicide bomber disguising himself as a priest and detonating a bomb as the Pope's motorcade passed by the San Carlos Seminary in Makati. The intention behind this assassination was to divert attention from the subsequent phase of the operation. However, due to a chemical fire accidentally ignited by the terrorist cell, the police became aware of their location and apprehended them a week before the Pope's visit. Subsequently, the individuals involved confessed to their involvement in the plot. It's a miracle. He always escaped death, and his life is proof God is faithful. Let's look at the early days of our beloved Pope, Pope John Paul early days. Karol Józef Wojtyła was born in Wadowice, a town in Poland. He was the youngest of 3 children born to Karol Wojtyła, an ethnic Pole, and Emilia Kaczorowska, who had distant Lithuanian heritage. Emilia, a schoolteacher, passed away from a heart attack and kidney failure when Wojtyła was 8 years old. His elder sister Olga had already died before his birth, but he shared a close bond with his brother Edmund, who was 13 years older. Edmund, a physician, tragically succumbed to scarlet fever, a loss that deeply impacted Wojtyła. Within a month of his birth, Wojtyła underwent baptism, at 9 years old, received his first communion, and at 18, he was confirmed. As a young boy, he was active in sports, particularly playing as a goalkeeper in association football. Growing up, Wojtyła had interactions with the significant Jewish community in Wadowice. Football matches were frequently arranged between Jewish and Catholic teams at school, and Wojtyła often participated on the Jewish team. Reflecting on this in 2005, he mentioned, "I remember that at least a third of my classmates at elementary school in Wadowice were Jews. At secondary school, there were fewer. I was on very good terms with some people. Additionally, I was struck by some of their Polish patriotism." It was during this period that Karol had his first serious romantic involvement with a girl named Ginka Beer, described as a Jewish beauty, with stupendous eyes and jet black hair, slender, a superb actress. During his early years, Wojtyła explored his interest in stage acting. He successfully completed his education with outstanding grades at an all-boys high school in Wadowice, Poland, just as the outbreak of World War II occurred. To avoid being forcibly taken to a German slave labor camp, he decided to work in a quarry under harsh conditions. In the middle of 1938, Wojtyła and his father relocated from Wadowice to Krakow, where he enrolled at the prestigious Jagiellonian University. While pursuing his studies in subjects such as philology and various languages, He also dedicated his time as a volunteer librarian. Despite being obligated to undergo compulsory military training in the Academic Legion, he steadfastly refused to handle a weapon. Furthermore, he actively participated in different theatrical groups and even ventured into playwriting. It was during this period that his linguistic abilities flourished, allowing him to acquire proficiency in an impressive array of languages. Among the 15 languages he mastered were Polish, Latin, Italian, English, Spanish, Portuguese, French, German, Luxembourgish, Dutch, Ukrainian, Serbo-Croatian, Czech, Slovak, and Esperanto. Notably, as Pope, he extensively utilized 9 of these languages. Following the invasion of Poland, the university was closed down by the occupying forces of Nazi Germany. To avoid being deported to Germany, able-bodied males were required to work. From 1940 to 1944, Wojtyła took on various jobs such as working as a messenger for a restaurant, as a manual laborer in a limestone quarry, and at the Solvay chemical factory. During this time, he encountered Jan Tyranowski, who introduced him to Carmelite spirituality and the Living Rosary youth groups. In the same year, Wojtyła experienced 2 significant accidents. He suffered a fractured skull after being struck by a tram and sustained injuries that resulted in one shoulder being higher than the other and a permanent stoop after being hit by a lorry in a quarry. Tragically, his father, a former Austro-Hungarian non-commissioned officer and later an officer in the Polish army, passed away from a heart attack in 1941. This left Wojtyła as an orphan and the sole surviving member of his immediate family. Looking back on these challenging times nearly 4 decades later, he reflected, "I was not present for my mother's death, my brother's death, or my father's death. At the age of 20, I had already lost all the people I loved." Unfortunately, more tragedy followed. Following his father's death, Wojtyła began contemplating the priesthood. Despite the ongoing World War II, he approached the bishop's palace in Krakow and expressed his desire to study for the priesthood. Shortly thereafter, he commenced his studies at the clandestine underground seminary led by the Archbishop of Krakow, the future Cardinal Adam Stefan Sapieha. During this particular period, Wojtyła experienced a significant event when he was struck by a German truck. The German Wehrmacht officers, upon witnessing the incident, promptly attended to him and arranged for his transfer to a hospital that confirmed his divine calling. On a fateful day, known as Black Sunday, on the 6th of August 1944, the Gestapo initiated a roundup of young men in Krakow in an attempt to suppress the uprising, similar to the recent one in Warsaw. However, Wojtyła managed to evade capture by seeking refuge in the basement of his uncle's house while the German troops conducted their search above. On that day, more than 8,000 men and boys were apprehended, while Wojtyła found sanctuary in the Archbishop's residence until the departure of the German forces. Subsequently, as the Germans eventually fled the city, the students took back control of the seminary, which had been left in ruins. In a display of selflessness, Wojtyła and another seminarian volunteered to undertake the arduous task of clearing the accumulated piles of frozen excrement from the toilets. Additionally, Wojtyła extended his assistance to a 14-year-old Jewish refugee girl who had managed to escape from a Nazi labor camp. The girl had collapsed on a railway platform, and it was Wojtyła who gallantly carried her onto a train and remained by her side throughout the journey to Krakow. In later accounts, the girl attributed her survival that day to Wojtyła's heroic actions. According to B'nai B'rith and other authorities, Wojtyła played a significant role in safeguarding numerous Polish Jews from the Nazis. Amidst the Nazi occupation of Poland, a Jewish family decided to send their son, Stanley Berger, to live with a non-Jewish Polish family for protection. Tragically, Berger's biological Jewish parents lost their lives in the Holocaust. After the war, Berger's adoptive Christian parents approached Karol Wojtyła with a request to baptize the boy. However, Wojtyła declined, asserting that the child needed to be raised following the Jewish faith of his birth parents and his nation, rather than as a Catholic. He made every effort to ensure that Berger would leave Poland and be raised by his Jewish relatives in the United States. Following the passing of John Paul II, the Israeli government established a commission to commemorate his legacy. Emanuele Pacifici, the head of Italy's Jewish community, proposed one of the honors to be bestowed upon John Paul II as the Medal of the Righteous among the nations. In Wojtyla's final book, Memory and Identity, he characterized the 12 years of the Nazi regime as bestiality, priesthood, and papacy. Upon completing his studies at the seminary in Krakow, Wojtyla received ordination as a priest on All Saints' Day, administered by Cardinal Adam Stefan Sapieha, the Archbishop of Krakow. Subsequently, in July 1947, Wojtyla obtained a license and successfully passed his doctoral exam on the 14th of June, 1948. Furthermore, he defended his doctoral thesis on the 19th of June, 1948. Following these academic achievements, Wojtyla returned to Poland and embarked on his first pastoral assignment in the village of Niegowic. Upon his arrival during the harvest season, his initial act was to kneel and reverently kiss the ground. This gesture, inspired by Jean-Marie Baptiste Vianney, became a recurring practice throughout his papacy. During a kayaking vacation in the lakes region of northern Poland, Wojtyla received news of his appointment as an auxiliary bishop of Krakow by Pope Pius XIV. As a result, he was summoned to Warsaw to meet Cardinal Stefan Wyszynski, the primate of Poland, who personally informed him of this significant role. Accepting the appointment, Wojtyla became the youngest bishop in Poland at the age of 38. In 1959, he initiated an annual tradition of conducting a midnight mass on Christmas Day in an open field at Nowa Huta, a renowned workers' town near Krakow that lacked a church building. This is where it gets interesting. Following the passing of Pope Paul VI in August 1978, Wojtyla participated in the papal conclave that elected John Paul I. Unfortunately, John Paul I passed away after just 33 days as pope, leading to the initiation of another conclave. This second conclave commenced 10 days after the funeral and was characterized by a division between two prominent papal candidates, neither of whom emerged as a strong contender. Eventually, Wojtyla emerged victorious on the 8th ballot on the third day, following the disqualification of 7 candidates. Upon his election, Wojtyla became the 264th pope in the chronological list of popes, and notably the first non-Italian pope in 455 years. At the age of 58, he became the youngest pope since Pope Pius IX in 1846, who was 54 at the time of his election. Similar to his predecessor, John Paul II opted out of the traditional papal coronation and instead received ecclesiastical investiture through a simplified papal inauguration on the 22nd of October 1978. During this inauguration, when the cardinals were expected to kneel before him to take their vows and kiss his ring, Wojtyla, as Cardinal Stefan Wyszynski knelt, chose to embrace him instead of allowing him to kiss the ring. Despite his position as pope, many people might think he had a smooth sailing life. Do you know he also faced his share of criticism? Criticism of Pope John Paul II. John Paul II faced widespread criticism for various aspects of his beliefs and actions. He was heavily criticized by progressive individuals for his opposition to the ordination of women and the use of contraception. Traditional Catholics also expressed their disapproval of his support for the Second Vatican Council and its liturgical reforms. Furthermore, his handling of child sexual abuse within the Catholic Church was met with significant censure. Moreover, John Paul II drew criticism for his endorsement of the Opus Dei prelature and the canonization of its founder, José María Escrivá, whom he referred to as the Saint of Ordinary Life. Allegations also arose regarding his alleged connections with Banco Ambrosiano, an Italian bank that experienced a collapse in 1982. The bank's chairman, Roberto Calvi, and his involvement in the illegal Masonic Lodge propaganda due, also known as P2, were central to the bank's failure. In addition to the criticism from those advocating for modernization, some traditionalist Catholics also denounced John Paul II. Their concerns encompassed a desire to revert to the Tridentine Mass and the rejection of reforms implemented after the Second Vatican Council. These reforms included the use of vernacular language in the previously Latin-based Roman Rite, ecumenism, and the principle of religious liberty, after death and canonization. Following the death of John Paul II, a group of clergy and laymen at the Vatican started referring to the late pontiff as John Paul the Great. This title, which had been bestowed upon only 3 previous popes, was used in a theoretical sense. Notably, certain Catholic educational institutions in the United States also decided to incorporate the Great into their names. Examples of such institutions include John Paul the Great Catholic University and various high schools named after John Paul the Great. During the funeral mass, which drew large crowds, Benedict XVI initiated the beatification process for his predecessor. This action deviated from the usual requirement of waiting for 5 years after a person's death before commencing the beatification process. In a meeting with Pope Benedict XVI, Camillo Ruini, the Vicar General of the Diocese of Rome, who was responsible for advocating the cause for canonization of individuals who passed away within that diocese, cited exceptional circumstances as a justification for waiving the waiting period. To qualify for canonization in the Catholic Church, a candidate must have 2 miracles attributed to them. The first miracle attributed to John Paul was the healing of a man with Parkinson's disease, which was acknowledged during the beatification process. According to an article from the Catholic News Service, CNS, dated the 23rd of April 2013, a Vatican Commission of Doctors determined that the healing had no natural, medical explanation, meeting the initial requirement for a claimed miracle to be officially recorded. The second miracle was reported to have occurred shortly after the late Pope's beatification on the 1st of May 2011. It involved the healing of Costa Rican woman Floribeth Mora from a terminal brain aneurysm. A Vatican panel of expert theologians reviewed the evidence, concluded that it was directly linked to the intercession of John Paul II, and classified it as miraculous. The next step was for the cardinals of the Congregation for the Causes of Saints to provide their feedback to Pope Francis, who would then decide whether to approve and announce the decree for canonization. On the 4th of July 2013, Pope Francis officially confirmed his endorsement of John Paul II's canonization, formally acknowledging the second miracle attributed to his intercession. He was canonized alongside John III. Testament of Pope John Paul XI. St. John Paul II was a source of inspiration for many countries in Eastern Europe to break away from communism. His passion for spreading the gospel led him on apostolic journeys across the globe. Despite facing various challenges such as illnesses, Nazis, communists, and even bullets, his unwavering zeal continued to burn brightly as a result of the divine fire within him. Saints are known for their strength and resilience. Throughout his papacy, St. John Paul II frequently addressed the issues of secular culture, many of which persist in our world today, highlighting the timeless wisdom he shared on a variety of topics. The prevailing notion in society is that love can be reduced to just exchanging gifts, or worse, that love is a fleeting emotion rather than a virtuous choice. As Christians, we are called to love beyond the superficial standards of the secular world and to emulate the love of Christ, as exemplified by St. John Paul II. The essence of life lies in being loved by Christ and reciprocating that love. In comparison to the love of Jesus, everything else pales in significance, and without his love, everything else is meaningless. In the life of Pope John Paul II, we witness a man who was chosen and prepared by God to serve as a bishop and pope, entrusted with the responsibility of guiding God's church. Despite the numerous duties that came with his papacy, John Paul II consistently made time for prayer, demonstrating his unwavering devotion. Furthermore, St. John Paul II displayed a remarkable closeness to the people and never detached or separated from them. He embarked on journeys across the globe, actively seeking out individuals from all walks of life. Even in the Old Testament, we can observe the unique proximity between God and his people. This profound closeness reached its pinnacle with the Incarnation when Jesus himself dwelled among his people. Following the example of Jesus, who is often referred to as the Good Shepherd, John Paul II also drew near to both the influential and the marginalized. He extended his love and care to those in his immediate vicinity as well as those who were physically distant. St. John Paul II was renowned for his deep commitment to justice. He fervently believed that God's justice encompassed the face of mercy and adopted an attitude of mercy in his actions. Additionally, he played a significant role in promoting the devotion to divine mercy, emphasizing the importance of God's merciful nature. When faced with his mortality, John Paul II carried the heavy burden of his suffering with dignity, adhering to the principles of Catholic bioethics by refusing disproportionate means. When it was time to go and meet his Father in heaven, he accepted it with all joy, knowing he had lived a life dedicated to God and nobody else. Not having a biological family and children, he paid a heavy price. If you like this video, please give us a thumbs up, drop a comment in the comment section, and turn on your notification bell.